Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Paul Prentice, Chair of this committee. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet on the Council's policies, projects, budget and services. And we also have present at this meeting from the Cabinet, Councillor Connie Nolan, and they're here to observe the debate as part of our engagement before decisions are taken. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the fire alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. The meeting is being minuted, recorded, and will be uploaded to the Council's website. And the Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Pippa, do I have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Flanagan and Mackenzie.
Thank you. And do we have any substitute members this evening?
Councillor Franklin is present for Councillor Flanagan and Councillor Bland for Councillor Mackenzie. Sorry, my mic's not working. Do you want me to do that again? Is that better? We have apologies from Councillor Flanagan and Mackenzie, and the substitute councillors are Councillor Franklin for Councillor Flanagan and Councillor Bland for Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. And could I hear of any declarations of interest we've received in advance?
None.
None. And are there any declarations that anyone would like to make now? No? Okay. So I'll just confirm there are no public speakers for the meeting this evening who will be heard directly before the relevant item, but there are no speakers, no one to expect. And we'll go to the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September. I trust everyone's seen those. And I'll just go through them very briefly. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. And does everyone agree they are a true record of the meeting? The general assent for that, please. Thank you. Okay, item number 6 on the agenda is the creation of a new city public space protection order. And as I've said, there are no public speakers to be heard for this item. We're going to consider the report of Susie Wakeham, Director of People and Place, and Marie Royal, Service Director for People. So I'd like to invite Marie to make her introduction to this report. Thank you.
Sorry, technology sorted. Good evening, everybody. Just a very quick introduction. So public space protection orders are one of the many tools that are available to the council to make sure that people can enjoy public spaces and amenities safely, living away from antisocial behaviour. An order usually specifies an area where activities are taking place and that are detrimental to the quality of life of those living in the area. And they're designed to ensure that the law-abiding majority can enjoy public spaces, again safe from antisocial behaviour. The legislation sets out a number of requirements for consultation and communication before an order is introduced, and once it's implemented, it can be extended, varied or discharged. So when you're creating a PSPO, the local authority must be satisfied that we've got reasonable grounds that a PSPO is needed. And some of those grounds are around that the activities that are taking place, the antisocial behaviour that's taking place, has a detrimental effect on quality of life or those living in the locality. It's likely that activities will take place and that they will have a detrimental effect. And it's likely that the effect or the effect of these activities is likely to be persistent and unreasonable. In order to make a decision on PSPOs, when this council moved to a cabinet system, the actual decision making for creating a PSPO now sits with full council. So this committee is asked to make recommendations to the cabinet. The cabinet will then resolve those recommendations. It will then go to full council for a full decision. So the existing city PSPO that we've got actually ends in November, so this month it ends, and we've carried out extensive consultation with the public to find out whether or not the issues that were in the last PSPO are still relevant, are still a problem, and whether the public feel that they're issues that still need to be tackled in the area. With the requirements for the PSPO, the current one, it includes drinking in public spaces, shouting, swearing, causing harassment, begging, urinating, graffiti, fly posting, refusal to stop busking, climbing onto or jumping from structures, and trading as a peddler. So we went out to consult on all those issues. The other part of the consultation that we carried out with the public was around the behaviour of delivery riders in the city centre. This council had a notice of motion that came before it around tackling some of those behaviours. So we actually consulted the public to find out the extent of the issue and was this a problem. The appendix to the report that you've got actually summarises each of those issues, the responses from the public, and the percentage that feel it's having an impact on quality of life. As a result of that consultation, what we are proposing with this city PSPO is that busking doesn't seem to be an impact on anyone. Nobody was supportive or felt that it impacted on quality of life. So we are proposing not to include busking. Climbing onto, jumping off structures. Again, way back when this was created, the current one 3 years ago, you know, there was a trend of people climbing up buildings, jumping off buildings. So it was included in that PSPO. Again, there's no evidence to demonstrate that this is a particular issue or problem for the public or those living in the locality this year. And similarly with trading as a peddler, again, there's no evidence to suggest that this is a problem, so we're proposing to actually drop that requirement. So the proposed city PSPO and the requirements for your consideration tonight are again around drinking in public in places, causing distress, shouting, swearing, causing alarm. Begging, we've redefined the wording. So with begging, we actually spoke to our rough sleeper team before we went out to consult to say, is this an issue? Is it something you feel needs tackling? And the response that we got from the rough sleeping team was around begging around cash points, making people feel uncomfortable, people feeling threatened. So we revised the wording on that and we consulted on that. And there was public support to include that stopping begging. However, there were comments, on the flip side of it to say, actually, some people felt it was okay and it wasn't an issue, but the majority of people felt it was an issue. Urinating or defecating in a public space, again, there was public support and evidence that this was a problem. Graffiti, fly posting and affixing notices to property without owner's permission. Whilst there was less public support from this, when you look at the graffiti numbers and the number of graffiti and fly posting complaints that we've had and the number of graffitis that we've removed, it's still evident that this is a problem in the area that we're covering. So we're proposing to include that. As I say, the new one for that we're proposing to include is the antisocial behaviour of delivery riders. And basically with that, from the evidence that the public gave us, we identified a number of areas. So aggressive riding, dangerous manoeuvres, excessive noise, danger to other road users, damage or risk of damage to private property, and harassment of individuals from vehicles. Now, what I would say is that with the delivery rider issue, we don't have the power to stop vehicles. That sits with the police. But the benefit of a PSPO and having requirements in place is that a lot of different partners can actually enforce it. So council officers can enforce it, any third party contractors that we engage can enforce a PSPO, and the police can use the PSPO to enforce the requirements as well. So any enforcement of any of the requirements, it is a partnership approach in terms of how we do that. With the delivery riders, I think it's also useful to point out that we've been engaging with delivery companies, we've been engaging with the bid and businesses, and we've been engaging with delivery riders themselves. So during the consultation process, we had parking enforcement officers and police officers going out on joint operations, and we've been continuing to do that on a regular basis because it's a priority within our community safety plan. And some of those operations, it's been about giving warnings, it's been about giving advice around dangerous driving and what they can and can't do. But it's also been about enforcing sort of road traffic regulations and ensuring vehicles are roadworthy and people have got the right insurance and tax and driving licences in place. As part of that engagement, I think what we have found is that the rules and requirements around the traffic regulation order that's in place, especially in the city centre, are not often understood, or delivery riders are not often aware of those restrictions and requirements. So we are doing engagement sessions with them to raise awareness about which areas in the city people can ride through, at what times, using what vehicles. And as part of that awareness raising, we are looking to produce a map for delivery riders, for delivery companies to sort of distribute to their employees around zones and what times people are allowed in each different zones, and suggesting stopping places for delivery riders so that they have safe spaces to stop and can easily access the distribution points and food outlets and shops that they're actually delivering for. So I think with the delivery rider issue, one of the challenges will be actually, vehicles moving at a pace and our officers being able to stop them. That could be a challenge. I still think it's worth piloting this and seeing how it works out, because from the consultation, it's a big issue and there are concerns around public safety. But as I say, the important part is that we carry on doing these joint operations with the police and also do this awareness engagement and information sharing about safe routes and the rules and requirements around the traffic regulation order.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So just to summarise, what we're recommending to Cabinet is the adoption of a new PSPO, which includes someone drinking in public areas, causing alarm, harassment or distress, shouting, swearing or causing other alarm, distress or harassment to others, no begging, urinating or defecating in any public place, graffitiing, fly posting, affixing notices and so on. And the final one, which is actually the new element of this, which is around the antisocial behaviour of delivery riders. And so I'll come on to how I'd like to suggest we deal with each of those items. But the next stage in the process, as you'll know, will be to feedback from this committee to Cabinet, which meets on the 4th of December. And then the Cabinet will make a recommendation to the full council on the 4th of January next year as to whether to create a new Canterbury City PSPO 2024 and then confirming an implementation date if it wants to do that. So that is the proposal we have before us. Sorry, Councillor Smith, sorry.
Yes, just one quick question. I was a tad surprised that the description of Canterbury doesn't include the Cherries, which fall in the Blean ward. And obviously that is a route which has some of these issues, particularly the delivery drivers on the Whitstable Road up to the university. So the first point is...
I just want to clarify whether that was the area that was consulted on, and I think Marie will be able to clarify that matter before we go any further. No problem. I'll find the relevant bit. While we're waiting for Marie to do that, I just do need to see a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Franklin. Could you give your verbal assurance that you're seconding it?
Second.
Thank you. Marie, go ahead.
Just to confirm that the this city PSPO will apply to St Stephen's, Northgate, Barton, Westgate and Wincheap. So Blean Ward would not be covered. We couldn't today amend this draft PSPO because you have to consult on the area that it applies. So there's no option to include an extra area at this point for the purpose of this city PSPO. We would have to consult on it.
Thank you. Dan, did you want to come back on that briefly?
Just very briefly, because the summary of description actually describes Canterbury City area, and of course the area I've just described, that part of the Blean Ward falls within Canterbury City area. So I'm not sure where the definition says that it should. I mean, obviously the consultation didn't take place, so perhaps a moot point. But it is something that, going forwards, I believe there is capacity within this to vary it over time, and perhaps that's something to look forward in the future, maybe.
I'll just invite Susie, who's indicated she'll come in there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can vary PSPOs subject to consultation again. So what I'd suggest is we carry on. This is a historic one. We've had this city centre PSPO for 6 years. And this is the historic footprint of it. You can vary it. We could look to do that and consult on that at a later date. That's not a difficult thing to do.
Thank you. So what I would like to do now is open the debate on this item. And what I will just, before we actually take contributions, I'm going to suggest that and this is up to the committee what it wants to do. 1 to 5 are existing; they already exist in the PSPO. 6, which is around the antisocial behaviour of delivery drivers, is the new element. So what we may wish to consider as a committee is whether we want to vote on 1 to 5 separately and 6 separately, or say 1 to 5 as a block and 6 separately. And we'll perhaps take a view on that after the debate. But it's up to the committee how it wishes to do that ultimately. So we may wish to just keep it simple, or we may wish to vote on those separately. But I'll take contributions from the floor then. I'll take Councillor Naomi Smith. Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Turnbull, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Yes, I don't. So we just talk about all of them at the moment, though, aren't we? Or do you just want to talk about the top
I'm
five?
happy to take contributions on any of the items, but it might be nice. It could actually be quite helpful if we take them one by one. But the new element is number 6.
Okay.
So in many ways, I think 1 to 5 are relatively settled in terms of they've been part of the PSPO for 6 years.
Okay.
So we don't. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, on that 1 to 5, quickly. Marie, you mentioned how you've asked the public about their perceptions of these, whether the infringements of these particular things. But are there records of penalty notices given for these items? I mean, and the ones that are being removed as well. I'm wondering about those. You say there was a previous problem with people climbing on things, jumping off them. I mean, isn't the argument that you have a PSPO to stop these things happening, and then so if they've stopped happening, can you tell whether that's because it's a PSPO and the people are now thinking twice because they might get, I'm just wondering about a bit about evidence from out in the field. Thanks.
Batches of 3, if I may, and then we'll go. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. But I had a very similar question. Was how many FPA, fixed penalty notices have we issued against these PSPOs, and particularly looking at the shouting, swearing, and causing other alarm, because I think that's one of the ones that a lot of people would be very wary of wading into. I'm a bit concerned at the number of respondents being only 103, which seems, I'm not sure what your normal consultations are, but I believe when the coastal PSPOs went out, there was over 600 respondents, and 103 seems very low. And so are we taking a low amount of people's responses as giving them a high priority? So that's my bit. Thank you.
Marie, do you want to come back? I don't see any others. Sorry, Councillor Moses, and then Marie, if you'd like to come back. Thanks.
Thank you. What assurance have we got that you have made every effort, or you will make every effort, to engage the delivery drivers? Because obviously this is quite a culture change for them, and some may have language barriers. So what's your plan to ensure that they understand what the implications are?
Okay, so with regards to the number of FPNs issued, I think this relates to our enforcement policy. So our enforcement policy is engage, raise awareness, give advice, encourage people not to do these acts and not to cause these antisocial behaviour problems. Most of the time when their incidents have happened, then that's worked in a lot of the cases where we found the incidents and issues happening. In terms of the number of FPNs issued around these requirements, there are very few FPNs issued, and that's because of the engagement and the education approach. So you know, these PSPOs and the threat of FPNs, it is there and it can be used, but all the time we're trying to avoid, you know, costing people money, criminalising people where they're willing to engage. So it is relatively low numbers in terms of the FPNs that have been issued. In terms of the number of respondents, it is relatively low in terms of the number of respondents, considering the number of wards involved. It's been out on social media. It's been advertised in a lot of places. I think the difference with the coast is that you know, there was a lot of residents and other people sort of generating interest at the coast when we consulted on the coastal PSPO, and you know, dog walkers, use of the coast, they tend to engage more when we're doing PSPOs. I think that although the numbers are relatively low, actually when you look at the comments and feedback that we've got, and you look at the number of people who say this has impacted their quality of life, then, you know, we've gone through the responses, we've gone through the numbers with legal. They are, you know, assured that actually we've got the public support to make this order, and include those requirements in the order based on the responses that we've got. So we've tested it with legal. In terms of the engagement with the delivery riders, you know, we've got this active group going with the companies, we've got it going with the bid, and we're going to do sort of on-site sessions. I think you're right, language barriers could be an issue, so we will make every effort to produce this in relevant languages, and that we're engaging in the right way.
Thank you. See, Councillor Buckland, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, on the begging, was it only banned around sort of ATMs and cash machines, or was it in general? And if so, I mean, you're not going to be able to find someone begging, and so it's going to be, or are you just going to sort of sweep them off to somewhere else? And then you've got things like the fixed penalty notices. You know, they're very keen to fine people when they drop litter. You know, they might be struggling with a family, one of the children drops something, and they sort of they could be pounced on. So I guess it's sometimes a balance where, you know, where these, you know, they could say you're being fined for that over there, and you're not here. We're not going to be able to cover all these areas. So I guess would be something to think about, how you are going to cover these areas and make it fairer across these areas that you've said. And then I know it's not on it at all, but something like leaving your engine running at level crossings, you know, that has an effect of my quality of life and people around there, and that could that's antisocial. So I was just wondering, you know, we have the signs up. You've paid for signs to be put up at level crossings and schools and things like that. How come something like that isn't included in it? Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, almost adding to what Councillor Buckland said, although it's covered by the police, several of the other manoeuvres here are illegal in the same way. E-scooters are not mentioned at all, and they have prominence as a hazard still. So it's and a nuisance. So I'm wondering if they would potentially be an includable item in that.
I'll take Marie. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. With the begging, it isn't just around ATMs, it's in the city centre. Obviously, there's a provision if it's organised street collections for charity, you know, that's exempt. We wouldn't look to do that. We have a rough sleeper team that work in the city centre. They work very, very closely with our enforcement team. and the enforcement team pass on information if they see anybody in the streets who's sleeping rough, and the rough sleeper team work with them and engage with them. I think, you know, what we found in general is that, you know, with begging, with collections of money, it isn't always the best way to help people, because that can sometimes sustain street life. It can sometimes be used to fund other activities. And the best thing is that our rough sleeper team actually engage with anybody that they find on the street. They work with them, they support them. By moving people on if they are begging or if there are issues, it's that ideal contact to actually encourage them to work with the team, and then the team can help them access the support services that they need, help them find accommodation. So often those on the street conversations actually lead into that more building of a relationship of trust, and then supporting them on to you know, new choices with lifestyles. With the fixed penalty notices, yes, we do issue more fixed penalty notices on littering. Littering is covered by separate legislation, so that's why it's not included in the PSPO. There is a balance to be reached in terms of issuing FPMs and tackling antisocial behaviour and using them to stop behaviour. There is an issue about expectation management of enforcement. You know, the council have got finite resources, the police have got finite resources, and we need to deploy those resources together to tackle the biggest issues that we've got and the things that are causing the most problems to our communities and to our residents. So I think one of the things that we are going to do, based on the recommendations and the decision of what's included in this PSPO, and whether we have this moving forward, is an enforcement plan. So it is about sitting down with the police, sitting down with our own officers, and looking at our third party contractor NES to say, you know, how are we going to enforce this? Who's going to do what? Especially with the delivery riders as well. You know, how can we tackle this? How can we use this PSPO in a way to stop some of these behaviours? So, as I said at the beginning, a PSPO is a tool, but not one single agency will deliver it. It's a partnership approach. So, but I do think the expectation management of the enforcement side is something that we need to think about. In terms of the anti-idling, again, there is separate legislation that covers anti-idling. We do regular operations with our parking enforcement team, especially around schools. So where schools say, look, we've got an issue with cars being left running, with dangerous parking, we do targeted operations at those schools where it's the biggest problem. It's a difficult one with parking at traffic lights and train crossings and the legislation, and we've looked into this, and it's not easy to enforce because of the definition of what constitutes a regular traffic movement. So if you stopped at traffic lights, you're waiting to go, you're moving with the flow of traffic. The same with train crossings. It's more difficult to actually stop vehicles. They've got to be idling for a certain period of time. By the time the crossings go or the traffic lights go, then they're not sort of in that time period for anti-idling legislation. So I think the way to tackle anti-idling is through the ops that we're doing, and they've been really effective in terms of changing behaviour, raising awareness, and making specific areas safer. Again, in terms of the e-scooters, we've deliberately not included that. You will remember the trial that went on in Canterbury, that was ended. You know, there is specific legislation which prevents e-scooters being ridden on the highway. And again, that's a police legislation that and regulatory power that the police use with the e-scooters. So that's why we've not included e-scooters.
Councillor Franklin, then Councillor Smith, is that okay? Oh, did you want to come back on that specific point? Yeah.
You are, of course, correct. There is separate legislation for that, but there is also separate legislation under the sort of Road Traffic Act for dangerous manoeuvres, aggressive driving, various things which are on this list. So I think you're excluding some in favour of others. So perhaps some explanation as to why.
Councillor Franklin. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, again, with the evidence that we've had and that with the end of the e-scooter trial, none of the feedback that we'd had sort of seemed to implicate that on the city centre, in the city centre area, the e-scooters were an issue. The highest and most pressing issue has been around the delivery riders and people's concerns about their personal safety. And that's why we're not including e-scooters, but we are including delivery riders.
Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm just going to make a comment and then a question. I think with the PSPO, I think in terms of the delivery drivers, actually protects them, this, because what I've found during my time when I've been walking about Canterbury at night is that I've seen delivery drivers being abused, being hit off their bikes, by members of the public that are disorderly, that are a bit drunk or whatever, So I think creating a healthy relationship between the public and delivery drivers is really necessary, not only for public safety, but for their own safety as well. And then the question that I wanted to go on was about preventing graffiti, because I read there that hotspots were being designed out. I was just curious, what kind of hotspots was you discussing about in this paper? And are you thinking about preventative measures, such as, for example, the Windsheep subway, which right now is having its wallpaper being peeled off and starting to be graffitied on? Would it be more cost effective if we prevent the spaces where graffiti can occur before they occur and we have to ask Kanenko to clean it? Thank you.
Yeah, Marie, do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right in terms of designing out graffiti, and the subways have been a particular issue for many years. Some of the projects that the team have undertaken, one was sort of Hales Place area, one was on one of the main subways. There were joint projects with the colleges, with art students, to actually design patterns and surfaces that couldn't be subject to graffiti. So I think as we identify issues in particular areas, that's when we look at it. We look at that multi-agency approach through that we use our community safety partnership, and we link in with different partners to look at that. And, a lot of the time, the graffiti is removed by Kanenko. We also have an in-house graffiti team. And I think for every one report that they get in online from somebody, they're actually removing maybe another two or three incidents before they're actually reported. So I think we've got a really proactive team to tackle graffiti. The less that people see graffiti, the less it attracts others to do the same, and the quicker that we respond and remove it. Again, it's about having pride in our area, that civic pride, and encouraging and discouraging sort of graffiti to take place. So we do look at hotspots on an individual basis, and then work with partners to look at how we can stop or deter that in the future.
Thank you. Are there Councillor Dan Smith? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Returning to Councillor Buckland's point about the idling vehicles and to my own about the e-scooters, I'm just curious as to Were things? Was there an option to in the surveys that were taken in? Because I don't see a question that relates to either of those things. Was there an option to put in, a free field to put something that's a nuisance to the public in that survey? Because if there wasn't, then obviously you haven't asked the question, so you won't get an answer.
I mean, obviously, people make free comments, and that's included in the consultation summary in terms of any free text comments people wanted to put in or add. When we went out to consult, we consulted on the issues that were known to us, that were issues in the area. If the public has suggested any new issues, then because of the tight restrictions that we've got on creating a PSPO, we would have had to go back out to consult the public on again. So I think for the purpose of this, we've consulted on known issues, we've consulted on what was already included in the PSPO that were previous issues, we've got the evidence. We didn't consider including anything else other than the delivery riders because that was the biggest issue that people were saying that they were concerned about. So that's why we consulted on the delivery riders as a new issue. Again, as Susie said, we can vary things in the future. So if intelligence and data starts saying to us, look, this has become a real problem in this particular area, then we can go out to consult again to vary the order to pick up new and emerging trends during that period. When you create a PSPO, you create it for 3 years. You can vary it at any time in that period. If there are new emerging issues, you have to reconsult, you have to follow the legal process to do that. But we are open to doing that if there are big issues that are coming out, new emerging threats to community safety, public safety. And then with a PSPO, you can actually then look at extending it. So rather than creating a new one in 3 years, if you vary it, you might think about extending it moving forward. So there are options and there are ways to pick up emerging threats.
Susie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just on the e-scooters, I mean, riding an e-scooter on land that isn't private land is illegal. That's it, black and white. So what we don't do in the PSPOs is list a load of things that are just simply illegal, because we could be listing things all day. So that's why that one's specifically not in there. On the anti-idling, it was looked at formally before. It was discounted, as Marie sort of alluded to. The issue with anti-idling is you have to issue a warning, give the driver time to turn the engine off, and if they haven't done that within a certain period of time, then you would issue an FPN. Now, by the time you've gone through that process, the barrier is likely to have lifted and the driver is driving off, and the last thing we want is staff trying to chase after cars that are driving off and causing other issues. So it was formally discounted at that point. We are keeping an eye on what's going on elsewhere in the country around anti-idling at level crossings. As Marie says, we do use the legislation in other locations, so outside schools, for example, where you haven't got the complication of, things like barriers moving and vehicles moving off. If we see that that is a success elsewhere, then obviously we would replicate that in our district. But at the moment, on balance, it doesn't work at level crossings. It works incredibly effectively, though, at school gates, for example. And for us, those are absolutely the hotspots that we need to be targeting because of the real impact on the children and families at those schools. So that's the priority. Doesn't work so well at level crossings. And e-scooters, we don't need to include it because it's just illegal.
Smith?
If I may just quickly come back on that one, Susie, as I mentioned before, there are things listed on those 0.6 that are already illegal. So whether something's illegal or not doesn't seem to be particularly relevant to the PSPO. I think, as Marie in her presentation said, it actually gives an extra layer where it's increasing the number of people who can potentially enforce something, not just the police. So or offer some kind of support to the public.
Thank you. I think if it was an issue that we were finding with the police and other partners, we were finding it difficult to manage, then that is probably something that we would consider. But the e-scooters is not coming up as an issue. Since the bird trial finished, the number of e-scooters around has diminished significantly. And I think because of that, the police wouldn't be supportive of a PSPO that involved e-scooters, because you have to have a body of evidence behind the PSPOs that you're putting forward. You can't just put something forward because we think it's a problem. There has to be the evidence, otherwise it's disproportionate, and there simply isn't the evidence to warrant that. So the conclusion is that the law, the fact that it's illegal to ride them on public land, is enough in terms of what the police can do to actually enforce it. So that's a conclusion that's come through partly the conversations with our legal team in terms of what evidence there is, but partly the conversations with the police too.
Councillor Smith, yep.
But I think, as I've already mentioned, the consultation itself doesn't specifically ask those questions. So you're looking at a free text version to actually collate that kind of evidence. In effect, you've cut yourself off from a fund of evidence because the question wasn't specifically asked. So I think it's difficult to be clear on that from what you just replied, Susie. Thank you.
Yeah, as I say, there isn't the evidence. We weren't made aware that this is an issue, and that's why we didn't consult on it. It's not coming up as a local threat at the minute, so we didn't include it in the consultation.
Councillor Buckman, then Councillor Naomi Smith. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to carry on what Councillor Smith was saying there actually about, it's not just e-scooters. I guess you've got like the e-bikes now as well. It's not just a scooter, like scooters have had their day. So everyone's on like these e-bikes, they're like zooming around the city and then like going up the hill pretty quick. And the trouble is, and with the delivery drivers as well, they're dressed in black most of the time, and not all of them have lights. So it's that you can't actually see them and you can't hear them, which is one of the main issues. And I'm just wondering, is it easy on the council website to report this, like problems with scooters and things? I don't know. I don't know how simple or straightforward it would be, or even if you can phone in about it. Thanks.
Do you want to come back on that now, Marie?
Again, with issues with e-bikes and speed, and the pedestrian zone times still apply to other riders of whether it's a normal bike or an e-bike, and the enforcement of the traffic regulation order in the pedestrian zone clearly sits with the police. What we would encourage people to do is actually report issues through Community Voice or 101, and that's where some of the evidence about the delivery drivers came from the police, in terms of evidencing this is a new emerging threat, because police reports go through Community Voice platform and then through the 101 report. So reports wouldn't come through to the council, reports would go through to the police, and we would encourage people to report things to the police, because again, public reporting is something that for many years it's been difficult to get people to actually pass on reports. But the more people report things formally, the more evidence that the police, the council, other partners have that there is a community safety issue that needs tackling. So we wouldn't necessarily expect it to come through the council. We would promote My Community Voice or 101.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points. About including the antisocial behaviour of delivery riders. Is it going to be discriminating just to have it against them? Because what about other people who may be on e-bikes or e-scooters in pedestrian areas who are not delivery drivers? And It's the overall feel of this that I feel, I've had two, since I've become a councillor, I've had two little old ladies who've been low-hanging fruit for the enforcement officers. One little old lady who got done on Herne Bay seafront, £100 fine for a sign that she couldn't, because they changed it in 2021, I believe. She hadn't been there for a while. Her dog was off the lead following her, wasn't rampaging across the whole of Herne Bay seafront. And I think that a lot of these things, the enforcement officers won't go near the people to change their minds, or because there's going to be a threat. And I just feel, again, what we'll get is the low-hanging fruit and the people who've, the child that's dropped the bit of litter, or the person that, and not sort of deal with the actual problems. So those are my 2 points, particularly around why just delivery riders are included and not everybody. Okay.
I'll take Councillor Carr Ellis's question, then you want to come back. Marie, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine follows on from Councillor Smith, because I was quite fascinated by the idea of having shouting and swearing orders when everybody who knows me knows I swear like a trooper, and have been known to get a little loud at times, as I'm sure my fellow Labour councillors will agree. So I've spent most of today wondering if there was a list of swear words I should avoid and decibel levels I should carry around with me just in case. But it did make me wonder, following on, as I said, from Councillor Smith's question, someone who looks like me is very unlikely to be stopped in the middle of the high street if I am having a usual rant to my husband. Whereas if I was a 21-year-old black man, I think it would be more likely that I would be stopped and viewed upon or reported. Are there records kept that aggregate for things like gender, age, race, so that we can tell that punishments, for want of a better word, are being handed out proportionately, that action is being taken proportionately? And do we know that 1 to 5 is causing such problems that they still need to be kept on the PSPO, and they're not just people who go, oh yeah, I've heard loads of shouting, or I've heard loads of swearing, or I've seen loads of this, just from their hearsay evidence? How are the numbers stacking up, and are they being kept carefully so that they're not disproportionately affecting one member of society against another? Thank you.
Marie, yeah, I'd like to come back.
So with the delivery riders, and are we being discriminatory with other riders? It is an interesting and a fair point. Delivery riders may feel that they're being targeted. It might be it might be difficult to identify if they are a delivery rider. If somebody's got a bag, does that automatically make them a delivery rider? So it is something that we've considered, and something that this committee wants to reflect in the feedback process. Then obviously we can feed that back to Cabinet. But from the comments that we've had from the public, it would all indicate that it is, delivery riders using the city centre in a dangerous way from the evidence that we've received.
Can I just come back on that? So, thank you. I think it's because there's been a rise in delivery drivers that people perceive them as a nuisance because there's more of them. And I would just wonder, is it a perceived problem than an actual problem? I mean, I think I read through the notes and it says that the drivers actually haven't mown people down. In fact, they're more like, from what Councillor, I forgot, Franklin, sorry, that's it. It said that, he often sees them being the ones who are being attacked and moaned about, so.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the reporting, nobody collects data on near misses. So that's one of the challenges that we've got. You could have somebody walking down the high street, somebody who is delivering or collecting something to be delivered. They do a dangerous mover, it's a near miss, nobody reports that. So there's no data on it. So all we can go off is what the public has told us in the consultation and anecdotal feedback that we've had that says this is an issue, because those near misses are not recorded. In terms of the sort of shouting, swearing, causing alarm, distress, I think whichever enforcement officer is dealing with this, whether it's the police, whether it's our enforcement officers, whether we use our external contractor, people do swear, people do shout, people do fall out. I think the key to this is whether it's causing alarm and distress to other people. And, there is a level of subjectivity in terms of the interpretation, but actually when you look at our numbers of FPNs issued around the PSPO, it shows that actually sometimes just having a word with people, just giving people advice, just saying, look, please stop, it works. And that's shown because of the number of FPNs that are actually issued around this particular area. When we're looking at the enforcement plan, we are going to be looking at having a session with, as I say, the police and our contractor to look at how we enforce this. Our contractor is really good in terms of collecting information on gender, age, ethnicity. The contractor and our officers and the police, all three of them wear body cam footage. So if there is ever a challenge, if there's ever an incident, we can review that footage, obviously not by the police, they will do that themselves. But if it's our officers, if it's our contractors' officers, we review that footage and we review it with the senior managers of the company, just to make sure that the officer conduct was correct. And there have been incidents where we have had sort of rudeness towards the public, and we've dealt with that and we've tackled it and we've worked with the contractor to pick that up. But we've also got a huge number of recordings of how the public actually treat our officers and other officers, and incidents and attacks and things like that. So there is a way of monitoring it. We can keep our eye on it and make sure there's no adverse impact or there's no discrimination, for parts of our community. And we'll monitor that closely. Sorry. One more, just on the dog control and the lady with the dog on a lead over at the coast. We are consulting, or we've just finished consulting on the dog control. On the dog control order. So that will be another item coming to this committee for debate.
We've got Councillor Moses, then Turnbull, then Bland, then Carr Ellis. Councillor Moses.
Yeah. Would this be reviewed to see the effectiveness of it? And if yes, when? My second question is there a reason why the delivery companies are not the one receiving the penalties? Can we do that? And the third is, can you give me an example of your engagement with the delivery drivers? Give me an example of what you've done.
Yes, quickly. It's on delivery drivers as well. I'm beginning to think I'm listening to what everybody's saying, and I would kind of support taking out specific reference to delivery drivers in there, because it really, because it does seem to be as potentially discriminatory, but certainly I feel quite uncomfortable with that being mentioned in there. And basically anybody who is cycling, e-biking or whatever they're doing in those pedestrian areas in those manners needs, needs to be sanctioned, or there needs to be threat of sanction for anybody behaving in that way. So why are we specifically making a? But I mean, I think this engagement is. I'd like to hear more about it, but it sounds a great thing, and that sounds really what's needed. And it is about letting people know that these things are actually illegal, and these are the conditions governing using this part of the city. But yeah, so that's where I'm coming to with that.
Councillor Bland.
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce one of the points that Councillor Moses was making, and the question is, I mean, from my point of view, there's a lot of evidence that delivery drivers in the city centre are behaving in an out of order kind of fashion, and as far as I'm concerned, that does need to be tackled. But part of the tackling of that kind of behaviour, even if you just extend it to all drivers, I don't mind about that, is also looking at what is motivating that behaviour. And the issue about what is motivating that behaviour, and here is the question, have we discussed with Deliveroo? Have we discussed with Uber Eats? Have we discussed with all the other companies that are running this what instructions they are giving their drivers? Because anecdotally, I'm told, if the drivers don't actually deliver their goods within a certain time span, which is completely unrealistic, their wages get docked. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is a massive motivation, which is a corporate motivation for bad driving behaviour in our city centre. And I'd like some reassurance that besides tackling the drivers, we're tackling the cause of the drivers as well. And are we tackling those companies about what instructions they're giving them and telling the companies you need to revise your expected delivery times to make it compliant with safe driving in the city centre? Because if not, perhaps we should go after them.
Thank you. Councillor Carr-Ellis, and then I'll just go straight to Councillor Dan Smith then.
Thank you very much. Following on from Councillor Bland's statement there, it's something that perhaps, I don't know, could be done via the bid, but perhaps something to think about in this as a possibility is to encourage the companies that use these kind of riders, and obviously there's some that operate remotely, like the Deliveroos of this world, to have two-wheel driver training for their drivers, and for that certification to be necessary if they haven't got it. Because such courses do exist, and it would be an encouragement to those companies to actually feature in their structure and their policy of the way they deal with their orders, that they need to allow for the functioning of the rule of law on the road for their drivers to get from point A to point B, otherwise the training would be an additional expense for no gain on them. So thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Bland's thread, and I'll ask Marie to respond. And it's actually very current because there was a Supreme Court judgment today, which some of us may have seen, relating to delivery riders who work for the likes of Uber Eats and Just Eat and Deliveroo, which said that they could not be able to join a trade union. So we have to consider that backdrop, I think, when we are considering amending this PSPO, bearing in mind that those who work for an employer rather than for themselves have a more defined rights, and freelancers and independent workers maybe don't have that. I think that's something that I'd like to see sort of reflected and recorded in our discussion. But Marie, if you want to come back on those points, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, wow, there's a lot of points here. Yeah. So in terms of the engagement that we've done with the delivery riders, so the police and our parking enforcement officers have been on the street and they've been chatting to delivery riders. In terms of the engagement has been around, there's been a group of them outside Phoenix. Hello, how are you? Did you know that this is a ped zone time? You shouldn't be riding your bike during this time. So there's been informal engagement like that. With the delivery companies, we've sat round the table with them and had conversations with the delivery companies. Anecdotally, what we are told is that people working for these companies, they are given the box, or they're given a round, they're engaged, and they're told to look at the highway code. What we have found is that very few of them actually understand what the riding times restrictions are in the city centre. So we've got a traffic regulation order, we've got a pedestrian zone, but actually it means nothing to these delivery riders who are timed, who are on, pay by job or pay by whatever arrangement that they've got. They are, the lower paid parts of our community, and it's time pressured. They've got to deliver in time, and their salary relies on that. I think one of the councillors said earlier, it's the changing result of our communities, post-COVID, this new approach to service delivery, new expectations of people wanting delivery of whether it's food from Sainsbury's or whether it's food from a takeaway delivery shop. People's expectations have changed, and the business model, as you say, it's weighted heavily in favour of these companies. If there is anything around the delivery companies that you feel you want reflected, or that you feel that you would like to pass on to Cabinet in terms of a national change in legislation or change in approach, you could recommend as a committee that you would like Cabinet to take a lobbying role in terms of some of those issues. And yes, the delivery riders don't know about the pedestrian zones, and probably other riders through the city centre are not aware of the traffic regulation order. So the work that we're doing around zoning will help the delivery riders have a physical or digital map of some sort to say, during these times I can't ride my bike through that area, I'll have to walk it, but actually if I'm going to this takeaway, this food shop, this outlet here, then I can park here and it will be the quickest route to go. So we're looking at doing those mapping zones, and we're looking at producing that to make it easier. Yeah, is there anything I've missed?
Through you, Chair, thank you. The other bit about delivery riders specifically versus general riders. Right, the way this works is that we went out to consultation on issues that were known to us and to the police that were being reported. At the time, the live issue was about delivery riders. So the consultation specifically said delivery riders. Unfortunately, we can't broaden that out to all riders at this point without doing further consultation on it. So not ideal, I guess, but what we would propose is that we try this with delivery riders, and then if there are still issues with other people who are riding bikes or whatever in the high street, we could look to vary. So we could look to go out and do further consultation to see whether what we're doing has fixed the problem or whether whether it does extend to other people. But our hands are tied. I double checked with legal today. Our hands are tied. It's got to be delivery riders or nothing. We don't have to put this in. But because of the way the consultation was set up, it is that specific.
Thank you. Councillor Old.
Clearly, this is going to be a growing problem over a period of time. And this is a bit left field. I don't wish to suggest this is to replace the PSPO, but couldn't we do some work with the bid to bring about a licensing arrangement so that not only are the riders licensed, but also the premises are only able to use licensed riders? And couldn't that be something to look at for the future?
Do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you. We did look at that. We looked at whether or not we could create a bylaw to do it. One of the issues is that the cost of doing such a scheme run by the council was prohibitive. And if you look at the costs and you look at the pass-on costs that we would have had to give delivery riders, it would have been unaffordable for them. When we worked with the delivery companies, I think their feedback was, if there was a change at a national level, if there was a legislative requirement for them to have an ID scheme for their delivery riders, then at least there would be consistency across the country in different areas. So again, you know, it may be that one of your feedback to Cabinet is that lobbying role to central government to think about creating a national scheme that actually the delivery companies fund, rather than the cost being passed on to very low paid workers.
Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is probably something, once again, that would just have to be asked by Cabinet to lobby, but it is also about the amount of drivers that, from my understanding, only have L plates, so I presume that they have passed their CBTs but don't have a full driver's motorcycle license. Thank you. And so I was wondering, is that having an effect on how motorcyclists are following pedestrian traffic orders, and whether that's a part of this narrative as well, is that people are just trying to get a job as easy and quickly as possible, that they are not going through, trying to get a proper license? I don't know, but something I'd just like to put to you.
Again, the traffic regulation order prohibits delivery vehicles entering the pedestrian zones in the city centre. So motorbike riders should not be riding in to pick up and collect deliveries. So again,
But would that be covered by CBT?
well, motorcycles, mopeds, they're not supposed to be in the ped zone, so the police can enforce that.
Right.
I think what I would say is, with the joint operations that we keep doing on a regular basis with the police, if they pick up anybody who has not got the right insurance, has not got the right licence, is on not a roadworthy vehicle, then they actually have confiscated vehicles, and they have taken legal action against those people as well. So we are picking that up, and we're picking that up through the joint operations. The PSPO wouldn't pick that up.
Councillor Turnbull, then Councillor Bland. Thank you.
Thank you. Just reflecting on what Susie was saying about the how inflexible it is at this stage in terms of changing the wording, can we just take back to really be careful when wording the consultations and really, really think these things through? I do have various issues with how consultations are worded, because I don't think they're very user friendly at all. When I've tried to do them, I've just got frustrated and just put comments in. But anyway, but that and it's something I do for a living, so it is something that I keep coming back. It's a bugbear of mine. But yeah, it just to sort of take that back for future reference, really. Thank you.
Councillor Bland, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on the notion of adding a recommendation to passing this proposal to recommend to the Cabinet to consider this PSPO. Can I propose that we do indeed attach a recommendation, and that recommendation should be at least in two parts. Firstly, the recommendation is that we lobby government that they should take action in respect of delivery companies to ensure that the workers of those delivery companies have trade union rights. And secondly, that we're lobbying the government to take action to ensure that delivery companies do not or are not allowed to continue with what can be seen as oppressive and unfair practices and demands of their workers to meet impossible deadlines that have a possible consequence to the health and safety of the public in terms of that. I mean, you can do better wording than this, but you get my gist, and that actually we actually create a situation where delivery companies do not actually penalise drivers for not meeting impossible deadlines, but they reward drivers for actually delivering their goods in a responsible and pro-social way. Something like that, anyways.
Did you want to come back on anything in particular there, Marie? No, I think we've covered quite a lot of the ground anyway. I mean, sorry, Councillor Naomi Smith.
Yeah, I'm going to. It's sort of backing up Councillor Turnbull's point as well, and it's about the consultation process, but then that we could be discriminating against delivery riders. So I don't think I can back that element of this because of that, because I think it should be it's either everybody who's riding or nobody, if that makes sense. And maybe that element needs to be consulted on again. I know that's a cost, but it's a thing that we should be very wary of when we set up consultations. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other contributions. I'm aware I've taken contributions from pretty much everyone. This side of the chamber, I've been quite quiet, but if you want to speak, please, please feel free to. I think what I'm going to propose then is a vote on the recommendations 1 to 5. I'm going to propose we take those separately, and then we take a separate vote on recommendation 6 regarding delivery riders. Just check. Does that sound doable?
So 1 to 5 on block or individually? We're going to do them all individually. It's fine.
I'm going to propose 1 to 5 on block, and does the committee see that as sensible? Could you maybe give me your general assent if you think 1 to 5 on block is a good idea? I see hands. That's good. So we'll do 1 to 5 on block, and then we'll take 6 separately. I think that's fine. So on page 13 of the paper, they're all listed all on the same page, and it goes into page 14 actually, with the last bullet point on harassment of individual from vehicles. I'm going to suggest also that we take, sorry, Councillor Stockley, yeah.
Really sorry, but I think one or two of us might vote different ways on different things in 1 to 5, so could we go separately, please?
Sure. In that case, if we'll take each of those separately then, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all separately. Sorry, that's more work for you, but we will do it that way. So we've got a more accurate vote, an accurate reflection on each then. And I was going to add one more thing, which I think we'll add afterwards, or suggest Councillor Bland's proposal, and there was a bit of discussion around lobbying, asking the Cabinet to lobby government. I would suggest that that's something that's done through the local government association or a body like that. But that might be, if we could record, if there is sort of a general assent that that's something that we should do. I don't know if we necessarily need to take a vote on that, but maybe just suggest that's something that goes in our submission to the Cabinet.
It will be in the notes.
It'll be in the notes.
Or we can take a vote.
I'm going to suggest that goes in the notes, and then the cabinet can take it from there. So over to you, and we'll take a vote on each of those. So I will read each of them out, so we're absolutely clear on what we're voting for, or against, as the case may be. We are going to the recommendations to Cabinet of the adoption of a new Public Spaces Protection Order, which includes the following activities. And the first one is someone drinking in public areas causing alarm, harassment, or distress. So please vote now.
And that's agreed, 12-1. Thank you.
So that vote has carried. The second recommendation is shouting, swearing, or causing other alarm, distress, or harassment to others, whether in the area or living nearby. So we're voting on that particular one. And
No, sorry.
oh, we're not quite there yet. And that one has carried with 10 votes to 3 with no abstentions. The third recommendation is no begging. And so that vote has failed. That vote has fallen. 5 yes, 7 no, with 1 abstention. The fourth vote is on urinating or defecating in any public place. So that vote that has that recommendation has passed 11 for, 2 against, with no abstentions. The fifth recommendation is graffitiing, fly posting, and affixing notices, pictures, or signs to property without the owner's permission. And that recommendation has carried as well with 12 votes for and 1 against, with no abstentions. And the sixth recommendation is around the antisocial behaviour of delivery riders, including aggressive driving or riding, dangerous manoeuvres, excessive noise, danger to other road users, including pedestrians, damage or risk to damage to private property, or the harassment of individual, is that individual or individuals? Individual from vehicles. So that recommendation has also fallen with 7 votes against, 5 in agreement, and 1 abstention. Yeah, so Susie, yep.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just double check that's because people think it should be extended to all riders? Yeah? Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So, Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, sorry, no, I don't like it. I think it needs looking at again. It needs further work on it, please.
So the next stage in the process is Cabinet is going to consider all of our feedback. I think a very clear steer, actually, from everyone here tonight. And thank you for all of your contributions to the debate on that particular item. And the Council will make a recommendation to full Council on the 4th of January as to whether to create a new PSPO next year. So we'll move on to the next item. I will. Do people want a break, or are people happy to power through? We'll power through. So I'm just going to the right page. Excuse me. Yes. we. Yeah, well,
Page 75.
Okay, page 75 of your paper. And this relates to the review of fixed penalty notices for environmental crimes. Let me just bring out my relevant paper. Okay. So there are no public speakers who will be heard for this item. And we're going to consider the report of Susie Wakeham, Director of People and Place, and Marie Royal, Service Director for People. And I think Marie's going to introduce this item. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, we've got FPNs in at the minute. We issue them. We've got fine levels. The report outlines those current fine levels that we've got. To help councils tackle sort of waste crime, the impact on the environment, the government laid a new statutory instrument to increase the upper limits for various fixed penalty notices. So this is in relation to litter and graffiti, fly tipping, and dealing with household waste and the duty of care. So it's a decision as to the fine levels that's made by Cabinet. So the level of FPNs is decided by Cabinet, and ONS are being asked to recommend to Cabinet on the proposals outlined in the report 2A, 2B and 2C, which is to increase fine levels for litter and graffiti to £200 with an early payment reduction to £100 if paid within 14 days. For fly tipping, we are saying that we will increase the fixed penalty notice charge to £1,000 with no early payment reduction. And that's because often with fly tipping, especially where it's significant amounts from unofficial waste carriers who don't have a licence, it can sometimes be linked to serious organised crime, but it's also linked to the actual impact on the environment, you know, things being dumped into the rivers, things being put into sort of wildlife areas. So it's the impact on the environment, but also the cost of actually removing that fly tip waste and the cost to the council. So we're not proposing an early payment reduction for fly tipping because we want it to be a significant deterrent. With household waste and duty of care, the proposal is to increase the fine to £500 with an early payment reduction level of £300 if paid within 14 days. In terms of the scale and scope of these issues, I thought it might be worth just giving you some numbers. So littering in the last 12 months, we've actually issued 3,066 fixed penalty notices. So that's for people dropping litter. With those fixed penalty notices, around 70% of them is a repayment rate. So Non-payers within that early repayment time are actually then pursued through the court for non-payment of the fixed penalty notice. In terms of fly tipping, we've actually took a number of cases to court where we've actually found people fly tipping, where it's been significant cases. And it's worth just saying that we've not lost a single case that we've actually taken to court during the last 12 months. So all of the cases that we take through to court actually stand up to the evidential and public interest threshold tests. So we avoid unnecessary expense. We've for fly tipping, we've recorded 18 prosecutions in that period. We've issued 9 fixed penalty notices and 13 warning letters. And for the duty of care, we've issued 10 fixed penalty notices, 6 warning letters and 1 caution. So that's just to give you sort of an example of the scale of the issue and the problems. So the report proposes to increase those FPN levels. There's information in the report about what other areas are charging and what their early repayments are. And it's just to seek this committee's views in terms of feeding into the Cabinet decision.
Councillor Dan Smith, Councillor Naomi Smith, Councillor Buckman, Councillor Bland. But I'll take Dan Smith first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Seems the Smiths are being quite aggressive this time tonight. It's more of a comment, really. We've got the 14 days proposed as the early repayment time. Given the struggles that some people are having with their finances, would it not be better to have that as 1 month so they can budget in their next payday how they will pay this fine? So I potentially recommend that we try that.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
I've got a loud voice anyway, but I don't understand what a duty of care is to your household rubbish thing. Could you explain that to me, please? Thank you.
Councillor Buckman.
Yes, just to actually carry on about the month for the payment, but also you do offer like payment plans, I take it, for people who can't even afford the early repayment. But in some ways, when people do get the fixed penalty notices, they're only given the 2 options: either pay now or it doubles. They don't say there could be the option of a repayment plan to help you out. And then it's the fairness of targeting or alleged targeting type of demographic of ages. Because I did notice in the consultation as well that the main people consulted were between 45 and 75. So it wasn't the younger side of that were within the consultation. And obviously it was with residents associations like ACRA and things like that, which are normally older people anyway. So I'm just concerned that people who might have a bit of tissue fall out their pocket or whatever will be targeted. We'll end up paying, well, not targeted, but we'll end up paying the fine, and there's no leeway for say, oh, sorry, I didn't realise, let me off. So.
Councillor Bland.
Yeah, I've got similar concerns about what we're doing in terms of increasing the fines for litter, although I think the litter problem is getting crazily out of control, and increasing fines does seem to be part of the way forward. Although again, the question might be, well, do we know the different behaviours between different demographic groups in terms of littering? And if we punish some people for littering in the street, is that going to simply increase the number of people that throw their stuff over other people's garden walls, which wouldn't necessarily attract the same kind of fine? So there is an issue there about that. But my main concern is the proposal around fly tipping. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I've got no problem about huge fines for organised fly tippers, I think that's entirely appropriate. But what I do have a problem about is thinking that, again, fly tipping has grown exponentially throughout the city and the countryside. What I do have a concern about is punishment the way to reduce fly tipping? What is the research around the country about the best methods for reducing fly tipping, and has that been considered in this decision? I mean, in some areas, they've reduced the amount of money that the councils charge for the removal of items, and that seems to have reduced their fly tipping massively. Fines don't seem to be as effective in terms of reducing fly tipping. And I would say if you're going to have a really heavy fine with no early payment reduction, please make sure it's targeted on organised fly tippers, not the person who can't afford to take their sofa to the dump, and therefore they dump it somewhere which they shouldn't be dumping it in.
Okay, Marie, if you'd like to come back.
Okay, so with the issue around the 14 days early repayment, if somebody contacts us to repay the FPN in that time, then repayment plans are put in place, and affordability is looked at, etc. Similarly, if somebody, and it links to the issue around, somebody drops a tissue by accident, if somebody appeals against an incident where they've been issued an FPN, then again we look at the body cam footage, we look at the interaction, we look at, was it a legitimate fine, or was it done by accident? And we've worked very, very hard with our contractor who's working on the litter side of things, because just as a reminder, we took a decision to outsource the issue of FPNs for littering to a third-party contractor. A number of years ago, we tried to do it in-house. It wasn't cost-effective, and an outside contractor can deliver that service in a better way at a lower cost to the council. So we've worked really hard with the contractor in terms of those incidents and their approach to cases, and they're very receptive. And cases where we've had challenges, we've looked at camera footage, and we've written off FPMs that have been issued, and we've done that in consultation with a contractor so they can pass that learning on to their employees. In terms of the duty of care and what that is, every householder who has waste is responsible for putting the right waste in the right bins. And, where it's overspilling in the streets, we have particular issues with HMOs and landlords and their duty. We can actually issue FPNs where waste isn't being disposed of in the right circumstances, and lots of side waste is being put out, it's being ripped open by seagulls, foxes, rats, and causing a health issue in a community. So that's what the duty of care is with waste, with household waste. We have not consulted on these fixed penalty notice charges. The government have basically looked at antisocial behaviour. They've looked at the impact on the environment. Keep Britain Tidy, the government. There's lots of research out there in terms of the impact of fly tipping, in terms of pollution on natural wildlife, the environment, and the significant impact that has. So we haven't consulted on these level of fines. The government's put this statutory instrument in place, and it's a council decision as to the level of fines that we actually apply to these areas. So it's within the council's decision. In terms of, again, you spoke about the punishment and was a punishment the right way of tackling this, and fines are not as effective. I mean, we've got a really good track record with the cases that we've taken to court. The promotion and publicity from those cases is actually a deterrent for other people. And, you know, we do find illegal waste carriers as part of this process. It's not all, you know, a household that hasn't got the funds to pay for the right disposal all of the time. Sometimes it is linked to organised crime in terms of some of these fly tips. And just to say that Canenco does offer a bulky waste removal service. So if people are on lower income, there are differential charges for that bulky waste removal.
I've got Councillor Franklin, and I'll take in batches of 3. So we've got quite a few hands actually. So Councillor Franklin first.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I've as you know, Mary, I've had a meeting with the contract manager for NES, and so I'm quite aware of the sort of littering issue. However, I'm very much concerned about the amount of hours that are being put into Northgate and Windcheap, and the fact that if littering does increase by another £100, how that affects local residents, especially those that are already suffering from the cost of living right now. The report done just this year, a report on poverty in Canterbury, showed that life expectancy was lower in Northgate and Windcheap because of the levels of deprivation right now. Adding another £100 on a littering fine, I think could cause some real problems, as I believe Dane was referring to one constituent coming to a third party, not directly to us, talking about the fact that she got hit with a littering fine because of her child. And the reason why she didn't come to us directly was that she feared the consequences of her coming forward. So already, people in these sort of scenarios are already quite anxious about where, the next bill is going to hit them, where their next meal is going to come from, how are they going to look after the children. But then to have extra stress of this, it's, I don't know, the question I would like to get to is, could we separate littering and graffiti as 2 separate issues? Because I could be very happy seeing an increase in graffiti, but littering, I think with the cost of living and the sort of communities it hits, I'm very concerned as to how it could affect local residents. Thank you.
Councillor Moses.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions I wanted to ask in terms of who is responsible for paying the fine. If you have children of school age littering in the district. And the point I wanted to also make is we want to change behaviour, and is it your objectives for coming up with the different penalties? Is it to change behaviour or to increase revenue? I think because if you're going to change behaviour, I think we need to have a different approach in doing that.
And I'll take Councillor Carr Ellis, and then I'll ask Marie to come back on those first 3.
Yeah, I want to highlight just how difficult it is to get rid of bulky waste unless you have a car. We don't have a car, and I'm now thankfully in the position where I can ask people to take me to the tip. But if I didn't, then I would be stuck. We wouldn't be able to do it. And for some items, for example, paint, the council just wouldn't come and take. So I can understand why people on low incomes fly tip, especially because I don't think they know that Canenco offer lower rates. So I would like to see more publicity around this, please. Definitely. Also, we have KCC in financial straits trying to close more of its tips, which is just going to make life more difficult for our residents. So why we're fining them when KCC are in a financial mess and threatening to cut more tips, it just doesn't seem very fair to me, to be honest.
The other two questions in a second, but I'll ask you to come back on those first three.
I mean, what I would say about the Northgate Windcheat wards is there's a lot of retail there as well. So it's not just residents from those areas that are dropping litter, it's people coming into those areas who are also dropping litter. Yes, you know, fining people in a climate where there is a cost of living issue, in a climate where people are struggling, it does seem counterintuitive. But the bottom line is people have to accept responsibility for their own actions. If they don't drop litter in the first place, they probably won't get fined. So there is an element of, you know, that civic pride, that self-responsibility, and fixed penalty notices are a way of reinforcing sort of that deterrent. In terms of why we issue FPNs, it isn't about income generation. It's never been about income generation. It is about having a deterrent in place to stop people littering and encouraging people to take self-responsibility. In terms of children, school children, young people, you know, with FPNs and littering, we don't issue FPNs to under 16s. We don't do that. However, again, it is about engaging with the parents if the parents are with them, and officers will do that. But also it's about working with the schools. And as part of the contract that we've got for issuing FPNs around litter, the company actually goes into schools and does engagement days with school children. So if there's a particular issue in a particular area where school children are dropping litter, you know, that company actually engages with that school to get the message across about keeping the area clean, having responsibility, having civic pride. Yeah, fully take your point about if you've not got a car, KCC are consulting about closing tips. We could probably promote the use of the bulky waste collection. We can look at that with Kanenko around publicity and raising awareness.
Thank you, Marie. I saw Councillor Smith and then Councillor Turnbull and then Councillor Buttman. Thank you.
Yeah, my question's about what's the difference between littering and fly tipping? Who decides what's fly, you know, if I dropped a big cardboard box, is it litter or is it fly tipping? Because there's a big difference in how much you're going to be fined. Or, you know, or a couple of tins of paint, or, you know, all the building material from my extension I've knocked down.
Take Councillor Turnbull and then Councillor Franklin, then I'll continue and I'll see you, Rachel. Thank you. As well, don't worry.
Is it me this time? Yeah.
Councillor Turnbull.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of people want to speak. Yeah, it sounds like this need for real sensitivity to people's circumstances coming across in a lot of cases or certain cases. I note that you put in comparison with other neighbours, and you also mentioned that around 30% of offenders don't pay the fines at present. And I wondered if you also do sort of comparison work with other councils as to how effective their finding or their behaviour change or their approach to these issues are, and also if they have a similar percentage who don't actually pay if you're actually trying to increase that. So does the comparison with other similar or any other best practice take place? Thanks.
Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on what you said, I understand, we need to obviously solve littering. We can't just accept people littering even during a cost of living crisis. What I would like to extend on that is, firstly, that increasing the amount of money is, the deterrent's already there with the £100. I think going £200 is going further than was necessary. I already hear from my constituents of them having to choose between heating or hot water, not hot water, heating and electricity. There we go. People are already are just about managing, and then to increase it by another 200 on this particular case study where a child was the one who littered and the mother didn't realize and then got hit with the fine. It's about having some common sense or practice from officers. Now, I do understand that all enforcement officers will have a camera with them and they do get reviewed, as the NES contract manager said. However, there are still cases coming up, and it's just about these people, the enforcement officers, having the training to be able to deal with those situations. But also, as Councillor Moses said, it's about having other alternatives to just enforcement, trying to find different ways of reducing litter. I think going for this sort of harsher way, it's going to cause problems down the line. And so I completely accept the personal responsibility as well as commercial activities. But, I would just ask for a bit of common sense in terms of how officers engage with residents, but also look at other avenues in terms of how we reduce litter. Thank you.
Miri, do you want to come back on those points? And I'll take the other questions after that.
With the definition of littering and fly tipping, I mean, the officers are well versed in terms of what is litter just dropped, discarded, and what is fly tipping, whether it's a mattress, whether it's a bag of household waste, several bags of household waste, carpet paintings dropped. If there is a particular hotspot for fly tipping, we know that some estates have had particular issues, especially on the outskirts of the Barton ward. People actually drive to secluded areas, get rid of all the rubbish and leave it there, and the residents are left with piles of it. So I think the definition of the two is quite clear in terms of officers and enforcement. And where we do have hotspots, we do use cameras, we put up signs, we do monitoring, and that does work as a deterrent. And I think linked to, the other ways that we can tackle litter and different issues, we had over the summer the coastal management plan. We are looking at developing a city centre management plan that picks up the issues of, the PSPO, other antisocial behaviour that's happening, the traffic regulation order, graffiti, fly tipping, the management of business waste from some of our commercial properties in the city centre that's causing a blight on the area. So just to sort of reassure you, we are working on a city centre management plan which will bring all that in together and look at ways of tackling those issues. There are national league tables in terms of number of FPNs issued, and sort of the way that different local authorities are addressing this. So there is comparisons. We put the comparisons in the report to the various levels. Fully sort of take on board your comments, Councillor Franklin, about sort of affordability and things, and we can record those comments and feed them back to Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Carnac.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think on fly tipping, I don't know, Murray, if you have the figures there, but one of the really big issues with fly tipping is it's not actually people going out and just dumping bits. It's con artists pretending that they can take people's household waste, charging them large amounts of money. And often, I think there was a recent case with an elderly lady who really wasn't up to checking the paperwork, and that was all dumped. And I mean, that was her responsibility. So you should check the paperwork. But one of the things is those people caught fly tipping need fining. And if you look at any response, the time it takes to go through the courts, the whole process of tracking people down, the CCTV, then they get a £400 fine. Well, that's probably 2 collections for them, so they'll go and do it again. I don't think we're talking here about, you know, the odd person that goes and takes a bag of household waste and dumps it round the corner. That does happen, but really we're talking here about fly-by-night activities that blight our district and blight everywhere. And I'm sure for any of you know who drive around country lanes and come across basically a whole household dumped at the side of the road. There was that awful one earlier this year where that poor couple had all their tyres dumped at the bottom of their path, which unfortunately was on private land. But again, you know, I think whenever I see any comment from any resident, they say, oh, is it only £400? It's not worth it. So I think a lot of people will be pleased to see that the maximum fine now is £1,000. And it is a maximum amount. That's not what everyone will be fined, but it's a long process to go through to actually fine people and catch people. And just quickly on the household waste centres, I think last week Kent County Council decided to ditch any thought of closing any of them, and none of them were going to close in our district anyway. Canterbury and Herne Bay were going to remain open. I still get a lot of people who complain about the booking system. I still think that that's one thing that, although that's nothing to do with us, it annoys a lot of people that they can't just go to the tip with their waste. And there is this perception then, I had it at a meeting earlier this week, that if you can't go and just dump your waste at the site, that you will just go and dump it round the corner. Whether that's true, I don't know, it's probably apocryphal. But I think, Marie, if you've got any sort of information on who are the fly tippers, I really don't think it's people, it's your average resident. I just don't think they do it. I think that's more of an urban myth. I think, unfortunately, it is people who go out and try to run an illegal business, basically. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one question, really. When a fixed penalty notice is issued, what sort of information is available on that notice to communicate with the council? Is it something that they have to communicate by web, or can they phone? Is there a, obviously I think there are, about 10 to 15% of the population who don't have the internet in their district, and with the economic climate that may actually stabilise or climb. So it may be worthwhile making sure there is availability for them to communicate within the whatever fixed period of time we take.
Thank you. And it's Councillor Buckman, I think, and that will be the last question from this batch.
Yeah, just a few things. Firstly, on that duty of care that you spoke about, will you at some point be doing a duty of care on the recycling bins? So if people are putting rubbish in the black bin that could be recycled, then there might be fines involved for that. And then about location of bins. So we can have a lot of development going on, and especially, and you've also got somewhere like Saxon Fields at the moment that aren't adopted by KCC, so there are no bins on them. So is there any way to speed that process up at all? And then, what do I put here? What percentage of the fine do the council receive from NES, and would it ever be worthwhile bringing some of that service in-house so that you would then receive 100% of it, that then you might not have to increase it to 200 because you'd get the 100 anyway? If that makes sense. Thanks.
Marie, if you'd like to come back.
In response to Councillor Carnack's query, at the beginning of the presentation, just to remind you on some stats, so for fly tipping, 18 prosecution cases, 9 fixed penalty notices issued, 13 warning letters. So the officers use a range of sort of solutions depending on the circumstances. And, you know, one of the recent ones that went to court was somebody in Herne Bay, and there were 3 instances of illegal fly tipping. It was organised work, and as Councillor Carnack sort of said and referred to, it is generally man in a van who says that they've got all the carrier licenses that are required. They take the waste to on behalf of somebody, and they actually then just dump it wherever they can. So there's a range of approaches, and it's based on the circumstances, and we do use judgment on that. In terms of information on the fixed penalty notices, there is a phone number on there as well, so people can ring if they've got a query or they want to pay it over the phone or they want to challenge it. With the putting recycling into black bins, no, there aren't any plans to start issuing fines and sorting out the bins from a resource point of view. We just would not be able to do that. In terms of sacks and fields, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but I can take that away and we can feed back on that. And with regards to the percentage of fixed penalty notices that we receive from the contractor, we get around 30% of the income. As I said previously, we've tried to do this in-house. We've tried to create a resource to do fixed penalty notices around littering and tackling littering ourselves. It's a very costly model. At the moment, the arrangement with Ness is working. We keep it under review. There's a time-limited contract with that, and we can look at it again in the future if we need to. But we don't have any plans in the short term to bring this in-house because of resources, because of cost, and because of the level of resilience that we'd have to create as well. And the model that we've got, we use the contractor to deal with sort of the low-level cases of littering, and our environmental crime team, who sits in our locality team, are the ones who do the investigations, are the ones who actually catch the illegal waste carriers in the act and take those cases to court. And that's the model that we apply at the minute.
Thank you, Marie. I don't see any, but Councillor Franklin. Yep.
Sorry, just one more thing. I could not recall whether it was answered or not about the littering and graffiti. If we were to increase it, can we separate them?
I don't know, but I will look into that before we get to Cabinet.
Councillor Bland.
Yeah, it's just a clarification. Actually, are we just being posed with you've got to accept these, you can't vary these very much because that's the way it is, or you don't accept any of them? Is that seems to be in your report? Either you don't accept any of these, or you've got to vote for what's there. I haven't got a problem about what's voting for there for the reasons I've said. Organised fly tippers do need vigorously going after. All I'd want to see is a broader strategy about reducing fly tipping that goes beyond just punishment.
Do you want to come back on any of those points? Or?
I mean, in terms of what's proposed, you know, we've done the benchmarking, we've looked at other areas. We think these are reasonable increases. And I think, you know, the committee can take a vote or give some recommendations to Cabinet based on your own views.
So I just should have done this at the beginning. What we should have done actually is taken. I should have invited a seconder. Thank you. Can you give me your verbal?
Seconded.
Seconded. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Franklin. I should have done that the other way around. I do apologise. We have, of course, had the debate. Does the committee have a particular view on how we take these? I think, do we take all this as one and just vote on each one? So,
Make a further suggestion. Do you want to separate the litter and graffiti?
We don't know if we can, but we could in the vote.
Yeah, so for the vote now, we don't know if we can, but we could do it one for litter and one for graffiti.
And it's a binary, it's increase or not. So it's voting to increase, and if you vote against, fine, let us stay as they are.
so should we just take as three then? So what I'd suggest then, what I'm going to suggest is we actually take 4 votes. So with litter and graffiti, we separate that out into 2. And then we take fly tipping and household waste. Councillor Smith, yeah.
Could we increase graffiti?
Don't want to increase the graffiti. No. we can, they are maximum fines, aren't they? So, yeah. Are we okay for a vote? Yeah. So well, the first item we're going to vote on is resolving to increase the level of the FPNs with effect from the 1st of January 2024 with regards to litter to increase to £200 with an early payment reduction to £100 if paid within 14 days. So this is just litter for the first vote. So that has not carried. That's fallen with 7 no votes and 6 in favour and no abstentions. So we'll take the second part of that one now, and we will vote on the graffiti increase. So that's the resolve to increase the level of FPNs with effect from 1st of January. Graffiti to the graffiti FPN to increase to £200. And so that one has passed with 11 votes in favour and 2 against with no abstentions. And so the next one is on my screen. The next one is a vote on the recommendation to increase the level of the FPNs for fly tipping. That's £1,000 with no early payment reduction. And that one has passed with 12 in favour and 1 against with no abstentions. And the final vote is on the household waste duty of care to increase the level of the FPNs to £500 with an early payment reduction of £300 if paid within 14 days. Oh, blimey. That has not passed. Check I've got my reading of this correctly. Can we bring that screen back up again? There we are. I can read it off the screen here. Sorry about that. So with 4 in favour, 5 against, and 4 abstentions, that one doesn't pass either. Okay. So that concludes the meeting, and the date of the next meeting is at 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 25th of January 2024. Is there any other urgent business we need to deal with in public? No. And there's no need to exclude the press or the public at this stage. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you at the next ONS in the new year.